Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have the founder and president of Soldier Fit, David Posin. David, how are you?
I'm living the dream, Frank. Excited to be on.
Thank you. I am living the dream too. I'm glad to have you on and interested in knowing all about Soldier Fit. How did you even come up with this concept?
Great question. So I've been in the fitness industry my whole life, and I met my business partner who was 9 years in the Army. And, I saw a lot of the things in the fitness industry that were doing really, really well. Mm-hmm. And I saw a lot of the things that I wanted changed. And one was community. I worked at a big box gym. Although there can be community in a lot of them, most of the time it's just not their focus. People come in, they plug in their headphones, and they kind of get off to their workout. So we wanted to revolve something around teamwork and camaraderie, combine it with his military experience. And there really wasn't anything on the market at the time like what we did. There was a lot of boot camps, but they were like Dynamic Fitness Boot Camp, Johnny's Boot Camp, Bobby's Boot Camp, nothing that really emphasized and brought in the military culture. Mm-hmm. So we were just sitting in the office one day, kind of talking. CrossFit was popular at the time, and we were coming up with names. And I think I just said, fit, something fit, Soldier Fit. And then both of our eyes lit up, and boom, I went on the USPTO, trademarked the name, and then it was off and running from there. And for a while, it was really just him doing personal training clients. We didn't really embrace Soldier Fit as it is today. We went and we were working out of gyms. We worked on a dirt field outside of a gym, and we were doing boot camps in the 100-degree weather, wintertime, 28 degrees. And so although there's some hard chargers that want to work out during those conditions, it really wasn't something that stuck. So it was really seasonal. And then we had an opportunity to go into a martial arts academy where we had our own sublease space. Mm-hmm. We set up a class at 8:30 p.m., set up a class expecting 5 people to show up, maybe if we were lucky. And there were 35 people knocking at the door to get in.
How did you find the 35 people?
Through social media, just kind of us talking about it, friends. I mean, geez, we were at a point, Frank, where we were literally operating out of gyms and giving people free t-shirts, begging them to just wear it because it had our name on them.
Right.
One of those was obviously to get the brand out, made us look a lot bigger than we were at the time. We had, 50 people walking around wearing our t-shirt. People were like, geez, what's this Soldier Fit program? Like, They seem to be blowing up. They're everywhere. But anyway, we set up a class for 5. We had 35 people, and we just said, look, I think we have something here. I think the magic's in the air. And then it's been kind of full-fledged from there. And as far as kind of my story, again, I grew up playing sports, so fitness has always been something that I've been passionate about. I played football on the collegiate level. Once I graduated college, I went into the workforce, right? I kind of followed that middle class rat race guide. Mm-hmm. Where you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job wearing a suit and tie. And so I started doing interviews for office jobs, selling copiers, things like that. And I slowly realized, like, look, this is just not the atmosphere that I want to be in. And there's nothing wrong with that atmosphere. It just wasn't for me. I needed to kind of get out and expand. So I got a job selling gym memberships, collecting $7 an hour, making commission. I got promoted to general manager. So I got to see things from a management perspective. I think I was like 23 leading, 50-person staff running a location. Then from there was a position that opened up called area director. Mm-hmm. So now I kind of got to oversee multiple locations in a big box gym. So I did that, and I got to see kind of business side of the house, the ins and outs, the 30,000-foot view. And then that company was actually acquired shortly after by Gold's Gym. It was like a $32 million acquisition. It kind of brought me at the point where, what do I need to do at this point? I can continue working into the corporate world. And we were still doing Soldier Fit on the side. I just hadn't gone all in.
Oh, okay.
And my business partner, came to my door and he said, look, in order for us to take this to the next level, like, I need you all in. Like, I can't do this with you part-time, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And it was actually perfect timing. I just bought my first house. So I have this massive mortgage, and I'm like, well, the logical thing to do would be to quit my, six-figure job and dive into, owning my own business that would pay me maybe a $30,000 salary. Like,
Right.
it seems like the smart thing to do. He gave me a hell of a sales pitch.
Did
He
he?
came in guns blazing. I was fired up. I left the meeting. It's like, let's go. And then I was all in, quit my job, dove in, full go. And then we started building this thing even more. I mean, we have an incredible team. There's only so much that I can do that he can do, like without our team just being all in. Our member base, our franchisees, their member base, loyal, diehard soldier fitters. So it makes my job a lot easier, and it made our growth a lot easier because it wasn't just us,
Sure.
preaching, come sign up or come join the brand. We had ambassadors as members kind of preaching it all over the place.
Right. Okay. So I love just the grit and the genesis of the story where you're starting outdoors and then going to subleasing, at the martial arts place, and then obviously giving up everything to go all in. But when you go all in, do you guys open a facility then on your own, or are you still subleasing? Kind of walk me through that.
So we had two sublease spaces, one out of a martial arts academy and one out of a sports complex. And so when I went all in, those were kind of the two sources of revenue. We built it up. I mean, the business was doing well. There was just some fine tuning that needed to happen. Another person to really focus on kind of the backside of the business.
So what do you mean what was going well? Like revenues were going well, but we needed to have the infrastructure and
revenue was doing well,
okay.
Right? Not nearly what it was capable of. The bottom line and profit was pretty much non-existent. There was no structure in terms of like keeping track of, expenses and things like that. We're a young business, and we were really young at the time, and
we're working out of the checkbook, basically.
Yeah, you understand how that works, right?
I totally understand how that works.
And so, we put in more like systems and processes. There was a sales strategy, but it really wasn't fine-tuned. Our 10 different sales guys are doing 10 different things. There was no exact structure, no consistency to things. So just adding those little layers in and making sure that, we're delivering a good workout, but we're also delivering an exceptional experience for people. It's consistent and predictable every time. Those were just the little pieces that were missing that we then fine-tuned. And we grew those locations. We had like 300 to 500 members in sublease, and we were just kind of busting at the seams.
Wow.
And there's pros and cons to subleases, right? It's very inexpensive because you're sharing the rent, but you're also sharing other things. You're sharing burden. Something breaks, something happens. How does those things get fixed? If you want to add something, you're kind of held back. Our class times were really unflexible because, martial arts classes were operating, from the sweet spots of like 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. So we ran a 4 p.m. and an 8:30 p.m. So we really were missing a giant sweet spot of classes.
Sure.
And it was crazy looking back at it that we grew to 300-400 members with such a random class schedule.
Right.
Testament to the trainers and everybody, for being able to do that. And so we decided that we needed to open our own brick and mortar, our own standalone. So we went out and, I'd never done a lease before, never opened a facility. And so it was kind of a crapshoot at that point. We found a spot that it looked good, looked decent. And so we signed the lease on that. And then permitting happened. And from the day that we signed the lease, we actually opened up another facility before the first lease got open. That's how long the permitting took on our first spot. And part of that was I just wasn't knowledgeable. I was inexperienced. I didn't quite know how the system worked on that side of the house. And so there was a lot of lessons learned. We burned through a lot of like tenant improvement dollars. We burned through a lot of free rent that now we advise our franchisees to be able to take advantage of. We speed up the process. But long story short, we opened our second location before our first, and we opened 2 locations within like 2 months of one another. And so, not only were we now our first brick and mortar, but now we're 2 brick and mortars ultimately at the same time.
Right.
The only thing that saved us was we had a member base coming from each.
Yes.
Which was like our savior. So we didn't have to ramp up as much as one normally would opening a brick and mortar. But yeah, that was just wild times.
So I'm curious did you guys bootstrap this, or did you have outside investors? Like, how did you guys finance this whole thing?
Completely organic. Because if you look at it, we started the business in 2007 and we opened our first brick and mortar in 2011. So there's a lot of years that passed, a lot of organic growth that happened. And I think the sublease part, right? It gave us time to fine tune those systems and processes and sacrifice a little bit of like fast earning revenue that,
Right.
we get now when we open a location. But yeah, completely organic, completely bootstrapped. Marketing dollars were pretty much non-existent. All social media, word of mouth. Again, I told you I was like giving away free t-shirts, begging
Right.
people for shirts,
David, you've listed so many reasons why this business should not have worked. Right? There's so many things. What do you think was the magic to make this thing successful? Because fundamentally there were so many things where you said this could have went wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I give a lot of that to my business partner. He's a massive dreamer, massive visionary. Not that I'm not, right? But his like outlook is so, I hate to use the word like distorted, you know? But, like his vision is so grand that no little thing is going to throw him off his path, which kind of pushes me along. I mean, I used to be someone who was a little more reserved, but being in business and being around him,
Being
I'm now
around.
more like open to taking risks and things like that. I mean, I would say, that's definitely one of the things. I think that the community and the culture that we've created, we're heavily involved in the community. Our franchisees are heavily involved in the community. We donate to military nonprofits. All of our rooms and all of our facilities are dedicated to fallen service members. Members wear a uniform, which kind of creates that teamwork and camaraderie. I mean, there's just a lot of little pieces added together that is kind of a part of the secret sauce.
That's so cool. There's a quote, I'll probably mess it up, but Steve Jobs had once said about, the most successful people are the dreamers that are most unreasonable. And you're kind of explaining your business partner is that the dream was so big and so unreasonable. But those are the folks, it's guys like yourselves that are successful because you have this unreasonable expectation. But what went along with it, because you could always have big dreams, but unless you do anything about it, you don't get anywhere. You guys were the exception because you had the grit and you had something really unique. Not to mention, I was thinking back to what you said earlier about Soldier Fit and trademarking it. I can't believe it was even available. I would have thought it would have been taken
I don't even know how I did. I don't even know if Google was around at the time.
Oh, that's great.
I must have figured out how to do it, and I stumbled upon it, and apparently I did it correctly.
I would have thought it would have been taken. That's great.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you grow this thing out, and as company-owned locations, bring me to the franchise journey. So who's thinking franchising, and how does that whole thing come to be?
Yeah, great question. And something that we really heavily considered, because we looked at the licensing route, and we were highly considering that because, again, I think I mentioned it earlier, CrossFit was very popular at the time, ramping up, and they were a license and they grew very, very fast. And, we looked at that option and we kind of said, like, what is the best path towards us? And it was actually one video that kind of changed the trajectory of what the decision we made. It was a video of a licensing company. And, at one of their facilities, this person was doing this absurd, ridiculous exercise that I couldn't believe that a coach would even coach. And I don't know how they didn't break their back. And I was like, look, if we license, like we are just opening this thing up for people to take this to whatever they might. I mean,
Right.
There could be a Soldier Fit offering ballet classes for all we know, and we can't really control that.
Mm-hmm.
And so like we understood the little things that made Soldier Fit so special and that they had to be replicated specifically. And we said, look, if somebody goes rogue and doesn't do it this way, like this thing could turn into a disaster. And so that was really the tipping point of when we said, like, look, we're going to franchise. We understand that the cost is going to be higher. The red tape is going to be harder to get through. There's a bit of a learning curve when franchising. And so we were willing to sacrifice all of that just to make sure that this thing was done right.
Doing it right. Some concepts, licensing is just fine. But in more concepts than not that I run across, franchising makes more sense. But like you're saying, it takes a lot more effort to do it right. And in some cases, the people that license, I've noticed they do it as a license because the cost is lower, but you're giving up a tremendous amount of control over the brand. And in lieu of saying that I have to jump through hoops and making sure I have a franchise disclosure document and I actually, support the franchise owners and making sure I'm doing the right thing and giving them what they need. There's so many more advantages of franchising. And I'm so glad that you guys recognize that so quickly.
There was another route. Like we were like, do we keep this a corporate brand?
Mm-hmm.
Do we just try to expand this ourselves? And we kind of looked into what that would take via resources, via capital injection and things like that. But really the flip side of why we didn't do that is we wanted to create opportunities for others to be in business for themselves. And the name is Soldier Fit, and veterans are attracted to us, but you don't need to be a veteran to be an owner of Soldier Fit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think giving someone that sense of purpose that they may have lost, which is really prominent among veterans, even former athletes that had some sort of like brotherhood, sisterhood, community that they've lost over a period of time, giving that back to them in the sense of like ownership, owning a Soldier Fit, but not just owning any business, like owning a business where you're surrounded by people who want to do good things for themselves.
Yeah.
They want to be healthy. They're making smart decisions. They're making healthy decisions to better themselves. They're spreading that positivity. Like it's just such a good combination.
So I understand you have 11 franchises currently in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, and you have the 4 company locations. Tell me about like who your ideal franchise owner is, besides the fact that maybe they do have a military background or not. What are some of those traits of a franchise owner that they need to be successful?
Yeah, and it's a good question. I mean, I think veterans are great. People that have played sports are great. But really, I think anyone who's may have lost their sense of drive, that has a passion for fitness, but not just working out themselves, because I think there is a difference between like enjoying working out and actually enjoying helping others work out. Right? So if someone has a passion for helping others better themselves, not just physically, not just like, hey, I'm going to help you lose 100 pounds, but like really genuinely caring about that person, wanting them to change mentally as well, being able to transform someone from someone who maybe lacks confidence, doesn't feel comfortable in their own skin, can't look you in the eye, to just being, that light in the world. And I think anyone who has that passion is the first step.
They have the right personality.
Correct. And then there's other, tangibles and intangibles that person, needs. And a lot of those things we can teach. Right. I don't know if you need to be necessarily super business savvy. You don't need to be the best trainer in the world. You don't need to be the best salesperson in the world, because all those things we teach really, really well. But you have to have discipline and you have to have drive. And I think anybody who's successful in the fitness game has all those things. Because think about what it takes for someone to be in good shape. You can't just work out once and then give up. Like this is a ongoing, consistent thing, doing things that you don't want to do, right? Because, think about the clients that we serve, even the owners that we serve. Like there's a lot of things you just don't want to do in business and even working out. But being able to do those consistently, time and time again, when you don't want to do them, that shows to me that you are a good candidate to be a franchise. So a roundabout way, right? Someone who's just super disciplined, but also someone who can follow a system and process. And that's a very like general term used by franchisors. But, we don't want people that are super creative or super visionary, like my business partner, that want to kind of create their own thing and change things, because we know what works, right? We know the secret sauce. We have it. We want someone who can take the playbook and execute it on, not someone who's going to write their own playbook. And that doesn't mean that value are the opinions of, potential franchisees or our franchisees, because a lot of our ideas and a lot of our successful ones came from our franchisees, which is great. But we can't implement every little thing that they want to then change, or, they're doing something good. They run into a roadblock and all of a sudden they want to veer off and try something different.
Right. That's always one of the challenges, because running a business as a franchise owner, it is a lonely job. And if you're struggling, you start coming up with all the reasons in your head on why you're struggling. And, in my own experience, I would hear something along the lines of, if I only had this, or if I only did it this way, then I would be successful. Versus what we knew was working. And it's a very delicate balance. It's a delicate relationship, as you know. It's certainly a two-way relationship, and know that you care about them, you're supportive, you're listening, you're taking their input, and you, by all means, you've integrated their ideas. But, it's a path that we have to navigate together as a franchise organization. And it could be tough at times.
Communication is so valuable in everything, especially franchising.
Right.
Whether you're an employer, an employee, whether you're in a relationship with your spouse, like you have to communicate. And that was kind of one of the things that I don't want to say we struggled with in the beginning, but it was one of those balances where, we had corporate locations. So I'm running this business and communicating with my employees here, but also I need to communicate this to my franchisees. what crosses over, what is different, what stays the same. And just over time, I learned like just being transparent and open and honest about everything is really the best policy to go with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're thinking about, should I send this email? Should I let them know about this? The answer is yes. Let them know about it. Send the email. There's no such thing as too many emails, because I struggle with that a lot. Like in the beginning, I was firing off like 5 emails a week sometimes. And I was like, maybe I'm bogging these people down with too much. And so I started to pull back. I swung the pendulum the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was doing too little. And I was like, you know what? There's no such thing as over communication. If they want to
Right.
delete these emails, fine. They don't want to jump on, our weekly calls, our daily calls, fine. But at least it's getting out there. Right.
Yeah.
And I think over time with that communication, now we have, buy-in is better than ever.
Right. You did a lot of things right. And I think that's the reason why you guys were so successful. And one of the things is making sure that you had company-owned locations, that you were cash flowing before you franchised. I cannot overstate that, because one of the biggest challenges, as you probably know in franchising, is that a franchisor starts up, it costs a lot of money to franchise, and they bootstrap it, which is great, or they take outside investor dollars, but they ultimately end up selling franchises to keep the lights on. And you guys were so smart in making sure that you had company-owned locations. So you have 4 now. How many did you have before you franchised?
We had 3 company-owned locations before we franchised.
Yeah. So that, of course, allowed you to understand what it's like to not just have one area, but you proved the concept to be successful in multiple locations. Maybe the demographics looked similar, maybe looked different. But in terms of the programming, is your business partner, was he really instrumental in developing the military style programming for Soldier Fit?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the beginning, right, that was his main job. Over time, we brought in people, to expand on that, to be better in that, and to kind of grow that as far as the programming. But as far as kind of going from and having corporate locations and then franchising, I mean, to me, and I guess I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think you bring up a good point. Like, it is necessary, because God, the amount of mistakes that we made in our corporate locations before we franchised are endless. And, thankfully we had cash flow to do that. God forbid we didn't go through those mistakes. Someone opens up a location and now all of a sudden they made a $30,000 mistake, which we've made plenty of those in the past. Like, that's detrimental. They're out of business at that point. So,
right.
We kind of burden those. And, there's also things that we can try out at our corporate locations to make sure that they'll work brand wise, which is another luxury of having a corporate location, even continuing on. Because I'm not saying that things aren't going to change within our brand. We're not going to come up with new strategies, because they will, right? We have to constantly evolve. We did that through COVID, and we had our own corporate locations to make sure that those things were going to work before all of a sudden we just sprayed it out among 11 locations and just kind of fingers crossed. I hope this worked. It doesn't work. We're in trouble. If it doesn't work at one location, okay, no sweat. But if it doesn't work at 11 locations, now we're in trouble.
Was there a strategy behind opening Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Ohio as more of a regional growth strategy, or was that just by chance that happened?
Yeah, I mean, Maryland was always our bread and butter, because this is where we had majority market share. We could reach individual locations if we need to visit. It's very easy for us to get there. A lot of our beginning franchisees were members. They just fell in love with the brand and wanted to open it up. Pennsylvania kind of just fell into our lap. It's kind of a cool story. We were running Groupon at the time. I don't know if you've ever heard of Groupon.
Of course. I remember Groupon.
Yeah. We don't run it anymore, but we ran it in the past, and we actually had a franchisee come in off of Groupon to use the facility. She was doing business in Maryland. She lived in Pennsylvania. She travels like every so often. She bought a Groupon. She did a workout. She fell in love with it. Ended up talking to our franchise development guy, had a conversation, and boom, next thing we know, they're opening up a franchise in Pennsylvania. And then from there, we branched off to another, location in Pennsylvania. And so it also allows us to get good reach, because Pennsylvania, it's a few hour drive away. If we need to get up there, it's very easy. Rather than like if we open one in LA right now, it would be a plane ride, right? Not that it's not possible, but I think our growth strategy is more specific, where we're kind of growing and expanding out. That doesn't mean if we found a phenomenal like master franchisee or someone that wants to develop a territory that we know and trust, we wouldn't expand out to the West Coast. But yeah, it was very deliberate and strategic. The one in Ohio, again, kind of fell in our lap as far as that goes. They were phenomenal operators. We fell in love with them. So, we had them kind of, open out there. But
Mm-hmm.
again, a quick, 5-hour drive if we need to get out there.
Yeah, I'm glad you took the time to share that, because there are founders out there that are listening to this and wondering, should I just go with the shotgun approach, which many of us have done, and you just, franchise everywhere, or a more thoughtful approach, a regional? You gave great examples on why it made sense for you guys to start regionally.
Yeah. And not only just regional, like the individual person is more important than anything, than any region. Because again, there's a difference between hiring an employee, right, and doing an interview process and saying, okay, well, if this guy doesn't work out, I could fire him in a couple of weeks, no sweat. Then bringing on a franchisee and you're married to this person. So the vetting process needs to be crucial. And especially when you're young, it's very enticing when someone's going to write a check for $20, $30, $40,000. Hey, this could be our jump off point. We just need one or two of these. And then all of a sudden things are going to kind of blow up. To me, it is a big mistake. And I'm not saying you can't do it and be successful. It's just not my recommendation, because you're stuck with those people. And then they are now cancer to the other franchisees, because franchise community is so important. Franchise health is so important. And if you have a couple bad apples, just like, if you have an employee in your business, it can turn the rest against you. Just make sure you're spending the time bringing on the right people and not just like having green eyes, kind of just looking for that big payday.
Sure. David, did you guys have a franchise mentor? Who taught you guys everything that you learned about franchising going into this?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a few. iFranchise was kind of the company that helped us develop everything. We visited a bunch of those franchise development companies that help, and so I learned a lot on the way. Harold Kestenbaum, who was our attorney at the time, he wrote a book that was super helpful. I can't think of the name, but if you come up with it, you can kind of share it with the audience. Those guys were super instrumental and super helpful with that. And a lot of it we just kind of learned on our own. Now, as we move forward, we have more mentors that we're involved in. Bedros Keuilian, who owns Fit Body Boot Camp, there are 1,000 locations. He's one of our mentors. And so kind of learning from those people that are way ahead of us and not really seeing those people as competition, I think is so important, like collaboration, right? I mean, one of our mentors owns a fitness franchise. You'd think like, Dave, why is one of your mentors someone who owns a fitness? Aren't you competing against him? It's like, no, we can all win, right? We all offer something different. And I know what I know to get to 50 locations, but I've never opened 1,000 location fitness franchise, So I'm going to need someone to kind of help guide me there.
Sure. And going back to your experience, you might not have been happy in your career at the time of working for that big box fitness center, but ultimately it was that experience where you were getting paid to learn this business. And I mean, it gave you a start.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I give a lot of my credit to that company. It provided me with a lot of opportunities. I enjoyed working there. I wasn't miserable being there. I knew that there was a specific ceiling, right? And I think that, people kind of open their own businesses or buy franchises for a couple different reasons. One is like, they're just miserable in what they do. They just want something better, or they like what they do, but there's no growth. I think as humans, like, we thrive on mastery. We thrive on growth and development. And if we're just staying the same, we're just slowly dying. And so I knew that there really just wasn't a greater ceiling for me there. And so that's ultimately, obviously, why I said, like, look, I want to create a challenge. I love competition. Let's dive into this thing head first.
Nice. David, there's a couple of things about your concept that I wanted to get, I want you to share. Number one, so I read somewhere that your franchise concept, there's an option of a brick and mortar or mobile.
Yeah. So we created this during COVID. And we've even expanded on that even further. Obviously, when COVID happened, all the brick and mortar stores were shut down. People were going online, people were going at home training. And so you could either say, okay, well, let's stick to our guns and just stay in location, or let's get ahead of the curve. We actually started our online fitness and our mobile fitness like 2 months before COVID hit.
Whoa.
Kind of saw the writing on the wall. Things were getting bad. You could see the news. We didn't know how bad they be.
Mm-hmm.
But we said, look, we need to get ahead of this. We need to be ready in case this happens. And so thankfully, we got a jump on that sort of thing. We were able to create a studio and we filmed workouts. We did live videos. We created a database of on demand. And all of these things were provided to our clients. Our franchisees took advantage of this. So they were able to keep most of their revenue running during COVID. Because think about it, like our members still needed help.
Sure.
We weren't going to also, think of it from a moral standpoint, like forget financial, like these people that we've developed relationships with, we're not just going to leave them hanging to the whim of like, hey, sorry, we're just not going to help you out for 3 months. We'll see you later. Like we have a responsibility to these people. And so, we wanted to make sure that we were still delivering health and fitness at a time that was 100% needed more than any other time, both physically and mentally. And so the mobile concept kind of came to fruition. Now we've expanded that even more where we have an online option as well as part of an additional revenue stream that we didn't have a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that was the other thing I saw, that you have multiple streams of revenue. So as a franchisee, I have the choice, again, brick and mortar or having a mobile franchise, right? And then I could be taking on clients strictly for online classes. And then who's running the online class programming?
Yeah, so we've filmed an entire database out of our headquarters. And so we have on-demand videos already filmed, but we also do like online nutrition, online consulting. We have an app that we've developed and created. So the individual trainers for the individual franchisees or owners are servicing those clients through the app. But again, it's a lot easier because things are already pre-built, things are pre-filmed. So the execution is more of kind of a plug and play turnkey on that side of the house. And as far as multiple revenue streams, like boot camp is always going to be our bread and butter, right? That's just what we do. But all those other things kind of feed into it. They're either standalone or they're hybrid, right? Because not to kind of dive into fitness, but there's 24 hours in a day. Like someone comes to our facility for 1 hour, that's 1 hour out of 24. Let's say they sleep for 8, there's still 15 hours left in the day to like leave people their own vices. That's where people fall off. That's where people screw up. And so like, we were like, why aren't we helping these people for the other 15 hours a day? We need to be doing something. That's when we created our accountability, nutrition programming and everything. That's becoming a huge, huge revenue stream for us. It allows us for a bigger ticket item on top of it. And it allows us to just kind of do like a full holistic approach on fitness and not just like when they come into the facility.
Now, how do you navigate the whole franchisee saying, God, there are so many franchises. There's so many fitness franchises in my community. I understand what Soldier Fit is, but how am I really going to differentiate myself to get clients?
Yeah, again, I can relate it to as far as kind of the little things that we do and the outreach of the community. This is what I tell everyone. The promotion's only as good as the promoter, right? Like I can give everyone the playbook. I can give you the differentiators, but if you don't execute on that, like there's only so much that can be done.
Right.
But I think that people that like that community franchise, that really, it means more and it gives back to the community so much more. People that want to be involved in that are the people that are going to want to be a part of Soldier Fit from a member standpoint. They're going to resonate with it. The name alone obviously speaks fitness, speaks military, speaks teamwork, speaks camaraderie.
Right.
And when we get people through the door, like you can see in the background right here, the facility is decked out in like full military everything. We have a Humvee front desk. Again, our members wear a uniform. We have, military decor everywhere. There's a Battle Cross Memorial. We fall in similar to the military. We fall out. It's just such a tight-knit community that people, obviously, that's why they come into the facility, not just the results, but the experience that they get inside the facility.
I would imagine too, people with military experience, they may have, their career ended in the military, but this probably gives them that feeling again of what it was like when they were the most fit.
It gives them another brotherhood and another sisterhood that maybe they've lost. And we do get a lot of people from a membership standpoint that are kind of lost in their way. They're not the studs and studettes in fitness. Most of our people are actually the opposite. Most of our people are beginners. they're scared to go into that big box gym where they feel like they're going to be judged, but they know that like Soldier Fit is a sense of community. They naturally, like, there is a intimidation, hesitation, right? By the name Soldier Fit, it's just natural.
Sure.
Once they overcome that, they're like, okay, now I understand. Now I can feel comfortable. Now I can meet new people. I can make new friends. I mean, there's people that come in that, like, they literally can't look you in the eye when they come through the door. Next thing you know, they're like, they have 20 best friends. They're high-fiving people. They're going out to the coffee shop. I was going to say bar, but I guess that would kind of go against fitness. But you go out to the bar, right, with the other members. They're doing community events. And so, it's just really cool to see.
Yeah. We're on the other side of COVID. And I think your brand plays in so well for that demand for socializing again and being together. And it plays into it perfectly.
Yeah. And God, I mean, now that you say it, I mean, it was hard for us. I mean, here we are, like we're high-fiving, we're like hugging each other, like we're in these tight groups inside the facilities, and all of a sudden, like, you can't touch anyone, you can't be near anyone. We had to tape up like boxes inside the facility for people to have their own space. I was like, man, like I feel like I lost a piece of my heart.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we were able to kind of pivot around that. We're back to what we were doing before, but it was a difficult time. And kind of to piggyback on what you said, yeah, I mean, fitness is more important now than ever. I think it always has been, but I think we're now realizing it. I think we're now realizing the effects of non-socialization, kids and adults, what non-activity really does or doesn't do for you, right? And, how much fitness plays into your health. Not that we didn't know before, but now we know. I mean, gosh, 50% of the population is going to be morbidly obese in, the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, that's a staggering statistic that we just can't let happen. So we have a responsibility to keep people in shape. And then you look at the flip side of it, where do people turn when someone gets sick or someone needs help? Like, they're shoving prescriptions and pills down people's throats. And it's like, guys, like, you're looking at the solution. It's just activity. Be active. It doesn't have to be at Soldier Fit. Like, it could be anywhere. Just be active, and that really is the magic pill. And I think people are starting to see that, starting to understand the agenda a little bit more.
Totally.
And I think they're kind of guiding the way of like, okay, now I understand why this is
right. David, you guys are doing such great work. And I love that it's wrapped around community. That is ultimately what Soldier Fit is about. Like you've said that throughout our time. And I just really admire what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
It's good stuff. Well, since you've been franchising now, let's see, it's about 8 years. What's been probably one of your biggest surprises that you've noticed?
Geez, our biggest surprise, franchising. That is a phenomenal question. I mean, I don't know if these things are surprises or not. I mean, these are things that we kind of expected, and I'm trying to find an answer for that. Really, I was hoping as I'm talking, something is going to come to me. Right? You saw the wheels spinning in my head. I don't know if I have an answer for that. Really, just true transparency.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, everybody has a different experience in franchising. I think that surprising can come from the outreach of the community. Where in franchising, where obviously the franchise community is so generous and shares information. Sometimes it comes down to the type of franchisees we weren't expecting. I think for you all, look, I think that I could see where your brand would have been intimidating for people to be a client. And as it turns out, it's people that don't have a military experience and just the regular folk that want to get in shape, that are part of your model, that are customers. That's to me is one of the biggest surprises.
And our marketing has to come. We understand that as a business, right? Soldier Fit can sound scary.
Yeah,
right?
It can sound intimidating. Like, man, I better get in shape before I go to those guys.
100%. So understanding that is like all of our marketing that we put out speaks the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Right. We're your friendly drill sergeant, right? We have, females and people that, are starting out their fitness journey and, they're high-fiving, people are smiling. So you can really see that shine in some of the stuff that we pull out because we know that is something that we do need to combat. We understand that like once those people come through the door, they will be able to see. We got to get them through the door. We know how to get them through the door. We have a system to make sure when they come through the door, they become a part of the program, because that's the only way that we know we can help somebody.
Right. David, what's one of the biggest pieces of advice that you give to folks that are looking to be part of your brand and become a franchise owner?
The biggest piece of advice for someone who wants to become a part of the program that like a potential franchisee,
yes.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, make sure you have the proper questions to ask. I mean, a lot of this stuff is not, it's more stuff that we figure out once we get on calls and we talk. I mean, making sure you're properly capitalized and understanding that obviously is a big thing for opening any business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the process is really not that difficult, for someone to become a franchisee, as long as they're the right person. And I don't want someone to fake that or have anything prepared for any sort of interview. Like,
Sure.
just be yourself. If you're a good fit for our franchise and our model, like, they'll be a good fit. And if we're a good fit for you, like, this thing can then become a marriage and we can move forward and have fun and have a successful future.
Right. Well, for your model, you put such an emphasis on it being the right person that's going to fit the culture of Soldier Fit, right? So it's going to create a challenge when we're awarding franchises to making sure that I need a lot more leads maybe than the normal franchise or an average franchisor, because they really have to fit your culture. With that said, though, have you thought about like the vision for the company, how big you plan to go nationwide? What are some of the thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, we started this thing because we want to be a national company. We want to be a 500 plus franchise brand. I mean, we know we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that we could probably be halfway there by now if we really wanted to, but we understand the value of doing it the right way, doing it a little bit slower. But yeah, we want to become a national brand. We want to change as many lives as possible, give as many people an opportunity to change as many lives as possible. And so that is 100% where we want to be.
I love that. And I would love for you to expand on we're going a little bit slower, right? Because there's founders that are listening to this, they just want to try to grow as fast as possible, open 100 locations. They're using an FSO and they're selling a whole bunch of franchises, and you guys did not do that. So tell us why going slow was right for you.
I mean, again, I think everything we do just comes back to culture. We've made plenty of mistakes. We've brought on some franchisees that maybe weren't the best fit.
We've all done it.
And we've had to deal with that, and that's fine. And I think that was a learning curve. And obviously the purpose of having this conversation is so people listening don't make those same mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it allows you to just have a better, more organic culture that can then grow and prosper, rather than having just like so many people so disconnected. If you grow too fast, you're not prepared for the growth. There's support that's involved. There's communication. There's expectations. If you're not ready for all that, you're just selling these things like hotcakes on the front end, but you're not able to fulfill on the back end. You're going to crumble. Just like any building, like, you don't build a building straight up, one straight line up. You build the foundation wide so that you're prepared to go as high as possible. Because if you start building up too soon, yeah, you'll go fast, but eventually you'll tip. But if you want to grow bigger and more sustainable, you'll create your base first so that you can grow taller and everything can support itself.
Mm-hmm. David, it goes back to what you said earlier. You built this company correct by having those company locations, cash flowing. You just have a sense of calmness that I get, talking with you, that you don't have that needed pressure where we have to open X number of new franchises every month to keep the lights on. And you just operate differently when you have that mindset of doing it right, not just, speed. Speed kills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speed kills good. Sometimes speed kills bad, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. Hey, this has been great. I've enjoyed talking with you. If someone's interested in getting more information about your franchise, how can they get more info?
Yeah, just go to soldierfitfranchise.com, fill out a application form, and one of us will get back to you and we'll have a conversation.
Cool. And right now, although going back to what we said earlier, although you're right now in Maryland, PA, and Ohio, you guys are available in other states, and
yes,
it comes down to right person necessary. That's most important.
That's it. That's where it starts. Absolutely.
Sweet. All right. Last thing, I always finish with a thing called the tip jar, because the franchise community is so generous and giving. If I was an entrepreneur looking to franchise my concept, what's one piece of advice that you'd give me?
I'd say have conversations with people who have done it, and deep conversations, and kind of look at the pros and the cons and the stuff that you need to be prepared for. And just make sure that you have everything ready to take that leap and you don't dive in too soon without understanding everything that's involved. From a monetary standpoint of, mapping this thing out from start to finish. Okay, franchising looks great, but like, how much money do I really need to put into this thing to start it, and then also to market it and to grow it? And then also, what is it going to take from a fulfillment standpoint of how many staff members am I going to need? How much money am I going to need to support it? So I think just mapping all these things out via pro forma or something like that is always the key, just to make sure it's a good opportunity for you, but also making sure that your model is scalable to the masses. There's a difference between owning one location, you as a founder who does it better than anyone, who's going to be probably the best at it. It needs to be a model that someone who maybe is like at a 70% rate as far as operating as you can still be successful. So again, to wrap it up, like that margin of error you need to figure that in and make sure that if there's that 30% margin for error, my franchisees can still be successful and still make a lot of money.
We're going to end it there, David. That is phenomenal advice. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was great having you on the show, and I hope to meet you one day in person.
Looking forward to it. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.